Hey everyone, Leroy from NoiseGate here, and welcome to our first look at what's new in Arturia's V Collection 8. Arturia have done an unbelievable job and packed stacks of new goodies here, including 4 new instruments, some sweet updates to existing ones, plus a major overhaul to Analog Lab, which has now been renamed to Analog V. At the time of shooting this video, I don't actually have a version of Analog V, so I can't show you too much, but we'll be sure to do a follow-up video and show you everything that's new. So with the added 4 instruments, V Collection 8 now includes a whopping 28 faithful emulations and recreations of many of the most legendary synths and keyboard instruments in the game. So let's get stuck in. First up, as you can see, Jun-6V, a beautiful, gorgeous recreation of the legendary 6-voice polysynth, the Juno 106. In fact, it's kind of a blend of the Juno 6, Juno 60 and the 106 combined. This synth is responsible for invoking all of your 80s pop culture nostalgia, but it's also played a big role in Chicago house music through the 90s and early 2000s, as well as being a go-to sound for newer micro genres like synthwave and other form of electronic music. But having said that, the Juno sounds pretty amazing on pretty much any genre, and has been used on countless popular records, so it's a really sought-after instrument, which is why I'm so excited to see it bundled up in the new V Collection 8 bundle. So let's take a listen. So one of the things that made this synth so popular back in the day, other than its sound of course, is the DCO oscillator section, or digitally controlled oscillator, which basically meant this synth didn't suffer from tuning issues like the traditional analog synths at the time. So it was really popular with performing musicians on stage. You know, you didn't have to pull up your synth, plug it in, let the oscillators warm up, and it wouldn't suffer from any tuning variations throughout your set. Now, they're definitely still analog oscillators, but they're just controlled digitally. Now, of course, this won't be an issue for plug-in users, but it was these oscillators, plus the silky resonant filter and the gorgeous sweet chorus that really had users addicted to its sound. So over here, we have a chord function. This is a really nice added feature. This allows us to select a chord by just triggering one note. So we can turn it on and then select any number of these chords that we like. You can choose from any of those, or you can kind of create your own customized chord shape. A couple of bung notes there, my bad. If we turn the arpeggiator on, we can arpeggiate the notes that are in this chord shape. It's a nice syncable arpeggiator, which is a nice added feature which wasn't found on the original. Awesome. And so here is the oscillator. It's a blendable waveform oscillator. So here we have a square wave, sawtooth wave, and we've got a sub oscillator as well. And we can draw in that sub oscillator amount and noise, which is cool. If we switch this to manual, we can also apply some pulse width modulation to our square wave. Yeah, beautiful. That's that sound right there. Moving along, we've got a high-pass filter, a non-resonant high-pass filter, and then the filter section here with resonance. And we can also apply some LFO modulation. And we've also got a syncable LFO too, so it will sync to your tempo, defined by the rate at which you select. We've also got these delay modes here as well, which is some sort of like curve settings for how much these delays time will sort of fade in. So that's kind of like a slow fade in. And this is kind of like a steeper, kind of sharper fade in as well. Cool. VCA envelopes, all pretty self-explanatory. And then, of course, we've got the gorgeous chorus. So there's 3 modes, well, 2 modes really, but it's kind of 3. The first one is certainly my favorite. Then there's the second mode. And then you can kind of have a combination of both, which is really nice too. Now, if we pop this little hood here, we can actually turn the noise of the chorus on and off. The chorus noise was really characteristics of these instruments. Some people hated it, some people loved it. So here you can actually turn it on and off. Personally, I love it. Has that sort of like analog hiss feel to it. But, you know, it's kind of cool to be able to turn it on and off. And then we've got this voice calibration function here, which is used to sort of emulate voice degradation, which is something that occurred with these instruments over a long period of time. And you've got these 3 modes that you can choose from just to kind of give it some more characteristics. Cool. So obviously, it wouldn't be an Arturia emulation if they didn't add in a few extra goodies. They've added in a second LFO, a second envelope, delay, and some reverb. So we've got a few extra options here. Plus, we can assign some modulation sources to modulation destinations. So you can use your mod wheel, for instance, to modulate any number of these parameters. And same with the LFO. Let's change its waveform to a saw wave, turn it on, draw in a value, and select, what do you reckon? Cutoff filter. Why not? Draw in the amount of modulation you like. Cool. And say, why don't we get the envelope to modulate the delay, dry, wet. So we can have our delay, dry, wet sort of follow this envelope shape, which is pretty cool. You can draw it in and do all kinds of stuff. And these are all of your destinations that you can select as well for your envelope. So there are 2 destinations for that second envelope, which is really nice. Plus a little bit of reverb. So it's quite simple, but it's really, really nice. I'm really loving this. Down the bottom here, you notice a few new things. We've got some macros. So these can be assigned to a MIDI controller or anything you like, but they're designed to kind of just give you instant sort of gratification, I suppose, or instant sort of control over your instrument without having to dive too deep into the programming. So if you're performing with this on stage and just wanted to make a few little edits, you could, say, increase the brightness, which is obviously just the filter. So rather than having to duck in and find the filter there, you've got it as a macro. And if you click this tab here, go to macros, we can assign these to anything, really. You'll see that these are all now editable and can be controlled via a MIDI controller, say a Keylab, for instance. If we flip it on the back here, we can sort of see this has sort of been redesigned now. So you can kind of explore through all of your presets, and you can create playlists as well. You can see I've created one here. So this will be really handy for, finding the most common used presets that you would use throughout your tracks to create your sound, or any saved presets that you make yourself. Or if you're using if you're using this on stage, you can create like a preset list for the tracks that we would use throughout your set. Next up, Emulator II V, keeping in theme with the 80s, of course. This is an emulation of the popular EMU Systems Emulator II sampler synth workstation from 1984. This was really popular with many 80s synth-pop artists, but the kind of sound design possibility this instrument features really brings it into the modern age. It was said to be a sampler that sounded like an analog synth due to its analog 4-pole resonant filters. and it had this really beautiful lo-fi quality about it due to the 8-bit sampling rate that it had. The sample storage was, stored on these huge, enormous 5-inch floppy disks here, and it could also be hooked up to a computer for further sample editing, a Mac computer that is, hence the screen just here. So yes, another classic emulation of another iconic piece of kit. And just like the Jun-6V, it has stacks of really beautiful presets, ripe for any kind of music production. And yeah, this is like a one-stop lo-fi machine. I love it. Really great stuff. So how it sort of works is this is sort of the global section here. We can control our volume, tuning, transposition, all that kind of thing. We have a filter to control through all of the voices, and we can have an envelope here as well. LFO, voltage controlled amplifier, arpeggiator, and effects with 3 insert effects, which we can choose different presets, different effects types here. So it's pretty sort of basic stuff, but where it gets really interesting is when we pop the hood of the sampler here, we can access all 8 voices in which different samples can be loaded onto these cells here and played polyphonically with our keyboard. It effectively becomes a really comprehensive multi-sampler, which is what the Emulator 2 was. So we can create some really interesting, complex instrument patches, and each of the cells can run through its own filter section independently. Filter, envelope, and VCA independently as well. We can delink them here. So let's go ahead and create, or load up rather, a default patch, and it's just a basic string sample here playing in this in the sample player. And if we hold down the note, you'll see it loops that region to create a sustained note. We can delink this and apply some filter. Let's play some chords. Cool, so you can see that there's quite a lot of possibilities here with what you can do. So let's move on to another sample slot, and we'll add in a sample. So there's plenty of samples that you can choose from the factory sample library, right? So let's go to, say, human voices. Where are you? Here we go, voices. Let's add in something like this. How does this sound? Double click that. Cool. All right. Again, I'll delink this, add some filter, and I'll do some kind of like different filter envelopes and add some LFO. We can sync the LFO to, say, 16ths and modulate that filter subtly. Nice one. So that's pretty cool. Let's move on and add in, say, another sound. Let's go browse. Now, before you ask, yes, you can load in your own samples, which is really nice. What have I got here? This will just take you to your hard drive where you have samples loaded, and I'll just load, say, this sound. Cool. It's sounding pretty good. You can change the volume levels of each sample here to kind of create a sort of hybrid of all 3 that's playing simultaneously. Nice one. Here you can assign your sounds to go on sort of different keyboard ranges. So if you want to say this sound to only be played on the lower octaves, you could grab this and sort of assign it to that particular keyboard range, so it won't play, it'll only play between the range of C2 or say, A2, whatever you like. You can assign that there. And then you've got 3 insert effects at the very end here. You can choose any number of these. There's choruses, flanger phases, overdrives, and even compressors. Righto, so next up we have the Vocoder V, right? It draws inspiration from Moog's 16-channel vocoder, except Arturia have completely flipped it on its head. They've added a 2-oscillator virtual analog synth, a sampler, modulation possibilities, effects, all while still retaining the sort of vintage analog sound. So how it works is we can either select a sample from the preset sample bank or feed external audio source like a microphone into the vocoder, and this will act as a modulator signal source. And the pitch playback is controlled via the 2-oscillator analog synth down the bottom here. This acts as the carrier source, right? So are you confused? Don't worry about it. Basically, it just makes awesome sounds. In the center here, we have a 16-band EQ, which will filter out EQ frequencies, which you can see displayed via the VU metering. And there's also 2 rows of connected jack in and outputs, which allow you to send different frequencies to the synthesizer, which gives you some really weird and interesting vocoder sound possibilities. It sounds really rich and at times quite metallic. I'm loving it. All right, nice one. So I'm just going to go and load up a default template. And this is what it sounds like.
This is the default preset.
This is the default preset. Excellent. So one of the things I like to do with vocoders is actually run drum machines through vocoders, because it always gives you that really nice, interesting, rhythmical effect whilst you get that processing from the vocoder. And to do that, I can actually run an audio input from my drum loops I have here loaded up, and send the audio from that to the audio input of Vocoder V. And you would use the same technique if you were going to run, say, a microphone, for instance. I'll head to the voice tab and pop the hood and go into advanced mode. And now I can run that drum sound into the Vocoder V. Super cool. I can also switch to the sample player, and this gives me the option to load up to 12 audio samples, which are in the sample bank inside Vocoder V, and sort of sequence them, and they'll all be re-triggered every time you hit a new note. So this is the default sample here, and you can actually audition it by hitting this little knob, this little button here, and it will just play just the dry signal.
This is the default preset.
This is the default preset. All right. But let's change the sample. So we'll go browse, and there's all these different categories here, but let's just kind of go vocal and say, let's go dance to the beat. Right. And then we'll go to another slot, and we'll go all night long. All night. All right, here we go.
Dance to the beat.
Now let's switch it back to the voice.
Dance to the beat. All night long. Dance to the beat. Oh, dance to the beat.
Cool. So we'll just kind of like sequence those two together, and so you could have some really creative, complex sort of sample via this really interesting sample player.
Dance to the beat. All night long. Dance to the beat.
Cool. So this is the 16-band vocoder here.
Dance to the beat. All night long. Dance to the beat.
So you can filter out frequencies using this. And you have this sort of patch bay here where you can send frequencies from the voice section into the synthesizer inputs. A whole bunch of different combinations will give you some really interesting effects. There are also some preset sort of effects, say double cluster. And here, this ensemble knob is really beautiful. This sort of like widens up that sort of mix and gives it some real beautiful kind of like chorus.
Dance to the beat.
Cool. And we've got an envelope here for the voice input. And then down the bottom here, we've got this oscillator. They've got two oscillators in this analog synth where we can kind of change the way that the sound sort of sounds. Cool. So if I just select this advanced tab again, just to take a look at what's going on here, we've got a few, we've got quite a lot of modulation possibilities with an envelope follower, LFO, and this modulation matrix here, where we can select modulation sources to modulate these destinations. Plus, we also have 3 insert effects, and each insert effect can be one of these one of these effects types. So the next instrument that's been bundled up in the V Collection 8 is the OBXA-V, which is obviously an emulation of the legendary Oberheim synthesizer. We've actually done a really great tutorial on this, as this was released earlier this year and has been since bundled up in the new V Collection 8. So I'll leave a link in the description for you to go check that out. Awesome. So as I mentioned earlier as well, there's been some updates to existing instrument. This Jup-8 V is a colossal emulation of the Roland Jupiter 8. And it features an updated sound engine as well, with some new sequencing and modulation possibilities. Plus, it's had some reworked DSP modeling and features some voice dispersion and an expanded arpeggiator section too. When we pop the hood, this whole advanced panel has been completely redesigned and offers plenty of sweet sequencing functionality, which is right up my alley. And also the Stage 73 V2 receives a rework. It features some more advanced physical modeling engine, new output circular emulation of the new Rhodes modes, and an additional pedal rig here as well, which offers effects like wahs and phases and all that kind of thing, and it's actually a lot easier to sort of see what's going on. But stay tuned, as we have some planned videos in the pipeline and some new in-depth tutorials on these, so keep a lookout for those. But in any case, that's pretty much it for me today. As you can see, there's loads of amazing stuff here in the new V Collection 8. I think Arturia have absolutely smashed it. So really damn good job, I'd say, Arturia. And thank you very much for sending us these early versions for us to try out. And to everybody else, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.